Welcome. This is the Drupal Usability meeting for May 16th, 2025. I'm Benji Fisher moderating, and Ralph Kohler is sharing their screen. Also present are Offer Shal, Simo Helston, and Thomas Howell. Go ahead, Ralph.
Thanks. We're looking at issue number 3163.716, add next and previous buttons to database log entry pages. We could simply go into a site and take a brief look what the proposed change actually looks like. It is simply go to recent log messages. That is the usual site page, and if you go into one of those messages, you get a next button. If you go to the next, you have the previous button and the next button, and if you go fast through, then you see the first problem already. The label column has no fixed width and therefore it's jumping, and that way it doesn't matter as long as you don't have the opportunity to go to previous or next. But with that option available, having a fixed position for your eyes for the next page would be really helpful. Anyway, but that's basically the gist of the issue. Any questions before we go into talking about the feature itself?
Has the width of that column been discussed already on the issue, or is that something that you've
Uh,
noticed in testing?
I don't think it was mentioned yet. It was more about the only thing in regards of the UI was basically moving out the icons so it is easier for localization, and the person working on the issue completely removed them instead. But aside that, it was more about technical implementation in the background.
Okay. Anyone
So
else? Does anyone think it's a bad idea to add previous and next buttons? Um, and is this issue with the column width something that could be treated in a follow-up, or is it something that's severe enough that we should really fix it as part of the same issue?
I think the column width is not really related. It's just something that is easier to notice.
I guess that's a vote for dealing with it in a follow-up issue. I get a thumbs up from Thomas. Go ahead, Ralph.
personally, I would rather vote to fix it within this issue, because for me it's readability related in that regard. And if you skip through having those jumps, and also as you can see, the position of the button also changed in one case. So if you want to quickly tap through searching for something, I consider it rather challenging.
Well, sometimes the message will be very long, like it sometimes contains a stack trace, and in that case, the buttons would jump vertically rather than horizontally. Um, in fact, is that what happened here? That it jumped vertically?
Only in one case. No, but my main gripe is basically having the not knowing where the starting line reading from left to right is for me. On the next one here, it remains the same. No, oops. Now it jumps completely to the left. And those labels don't change. So personally, I consider it part of that issue, but yeah, if all others say it is for follow-up, then it's fine, but I would.
I think if one of them is theme dependent and the other one is those buttons, they would be apply for every theme. So it's there would maybe be need to do so it doesn't fix it everywhere. Do we have some standard table things where we have like that kind of label columns elsewhere? So is this something that is wider? Should it have some kind of class or for like fixing the width or something like so? So that should it be a universal solution for different a certain kind of table?
I think
That's
in reports, maybe. No.
Yeah, I don't think this is created by a view, but there is a sort of standard table render element that it probably uses. And offhand, I don't know whether that has an option to declare the first column as labels. My guess is that it doesn't.
And talking of consistency, the other question I ask myself is, are there other cases of previous and next buttons aside pagination on, for example, oops, not here, on here. Those, it's a shortened, not the full-fledged pagination like on the content page, but is there something for that kind of previous and next button pattern somewhere in core?
This is a little different. I mean, there's a listing page and the details page, and this issue is putting previous and next buttons on the details page, which is not the same as a
Yeah,
standard pager.
I know, but no, but just I meant
So
if
is that
there's a
pattern
pattern.
used anywhere
Yeah,
else? Simo puts a link in the chat. Contrib module.
So it's a bit not so easy to click on the image because the previous next buttons are their own image. So need to click on the so on the very bottom there is a very low like a very wide and not so high.
there it is. Okay.
So this is not very good screenshot. But anyway.
No. Agreed. Hmm.
Since we don't know, we don't remember having that anywhere else. I'm also wondering if it would be useful to have it above
Yeah.
content, because then especially if it's long content and if we are using those to search a certain error, maybe certain time or checking times, then we could would probably want to look at the first few fields of the messages and then try to find the correct one.
In the context of pagination, there we've discussed that a few months ago. And on that page, you have the bottom pagination, but we've created a follow-up issue back then for adding the pagination also on top. So the question I wonder about is, would it make sense to have a previous and next button at the bottom and the top as well here? Or is that an overkill?
Well, that would certainly solve the problem of vertical jumping. On the other hand, it's additional something that doesn't really have much information before you get to the actual information on the page. I also think it's an unfamiliar pattern to have previous and next buttons at the top. Maybe not.
But there's also the other point, also without the previous and next button, before you had the problem with there's no direct link or action to get you back to the listing page. The only way is basically use the breadcrumb, but a dedicated back button in air quotes is not available. If it maybe is something to consider. And also the other point to note is if you take a look, those are both just links, but styled as buttons. Should they be buttons?
I don't think they should be buttons.
Does the URL change? I think it does.
Yes,
Yeah, we will changes.
they're just links.
Yeah, but then style them as action links, maybe, and not as buttons.
So I guess the pager elements we were looking at a minute ago are styled as ordinary links.
Yeah.
Do you think that the styling as buttons leads to confusion, that people will be confused about what happens when you click on them?
Not necessarily, but I think still trying to be consistent
Yeah,
semantically.
I agree. So it should be, even if it looks a little bit like, if it's styled a little bit like button, it should be distinguishable if it's button or if it's not.
Yeah, if you would use an action link, which is also looking sort of like a button, but has also already an icon within it, then it would be more consistent with the style guide as well as semantically. And the only thing I wonder, is it just previous and next? Should it be some sort of context added as well.
What do you mean?
Mm. Sort of, yeah. I'm not sure that I'm just ideating. Error message number 41, but a number doesn't bring any additional helpful information. It might be even noise, but just the next log message, or if it's a link and that link just says next, then it's not that precise. Let's put it that way. And with front loading, for example, a screen reader user can still jump off at any time and skip the rest of the announcement.
So one of the advantages of styling them as buttons is that it's more visually noticeable. If we go to links, then I wonder if we might want to add a little bit of text. So maybe go to log message colon previous next.
1 second, I'm just loading the Figma file. Oops.
And this is the style guide for Claro.
Yeah. And yeah, those action links, that was I was thinking about with first and last.
Can you zoom in a little further? So the first and last, are there also previous and next related to that?
They don't, yeah, as we've already noticed, we haven't come up with a pattern with previous and next buttons in core we could think of. So same here, it's only thought of in the context of pagination, but I think the pattern here could simply also apply to previous and next.
And that example is very odd. It says first, first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
last, last. I would expect something like first, previous, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, next, last.
Yep.
And I also wonder why first has a vertical bar and then the less than sign, and last just has a greater than sign. Obviously, that's intentional, but I don't know what the reason is.
Me neither. But compared to as a call to action and link. Yeah, it's a navigational element.
And I think of it more as add new, but the examples given here are find out more or cancel. And find out more is certainly purely navigational.
Where have you found find out more?
In the text at the top.
There. Okay, yeah. Okay, now see it.
So I guess from this, it does look as though the action link is the appropriate element to use. And perhaps just to make it more visually noticeable, we could use the longer text, next log message, previous log message, and that might also be better for screen readers than simply the words previous and next. Go ahead.
Just one idea. Um, now that the horizontal top bar is available and which is contextual, would it make sense to move those action links there instead?
Oh, I'm really not at all familiar with the top bar.
It's a work in progress, and I don't think at this point it would make sense yet. But in the long run, um, if navigation is moved there, it would make sense. At the moment, if you go in here, oops, I guess the only thing. Yeah, it's only in a few contexts that the bar shows up. And then you have, for example, an edit button here and that trash bin with actions. But if those contextual links would go there,
yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense. That would solve the problem with vertical jumping. Um, but it's not something that we should recommend
at this point,
now.
not yet. Yep, I agree.
Go ahead, Simo. You're still muted. Simo, are you having audio problems?
Yeah, I had some additional audio from the dogs, so I had to. Yeah, so question about how this works. When you filter the log messages, does it go next and previews in the filtered version?
Oh, good point.
My guess is that it doesn't, but
Okay, we have now type cron. No, we have system now.
I think I added a couple of page not founds, so you can try and use those.
right, filter on page not found and then try it
Ah,
back.
only one page not found.
Yeah, so go to that one and then click the previous button.
That you. Oh,
Yeah. So it's not respecting the filter values.
that you meant. Okay. Hmm.
So is that expected? Is it more useful that it respects the filters?
Well, it should inform the user what it's doing. So if you're on the list, open one item and click next. I think the assumption would be it goes to the next one on the list.
Okay, so you think it is the expected behavior that if you start at recent log message, filter, and open one of them, that the previous and next buttons should preserve the filters.
Yeah, I would expect that, but I'm not sure if other people would. So that's something I don't know. But for myself, I would expect it to kind of follow the list.
Go ahead, Ralph.
But is something like that technical possible? Because the filter is on one page and then you go to another page and then you would have to carry over basically the filter selection.
Right. So when you filter the log messages, I think you get something query string um, in the URL.
Yeah.
So copying that query string to the details page would be easy. But then computing the next and previous links would be more work, but doable. Um, yeah, thinking about cases where I've had to search through log messages on live sites. Unfortunately, I've often had to deal with sites that had tons and tons of log messages because there were lots and lots of PHP warnings that were never dealt with. And if I say filter on the actual error messages and don't look at the warnings and notices, then I agree with Simo that it would be helpful to preserve that filter as I go from one to the next. I guess what I usually do is from the listing page, I open multiple details pages in separate tabs. But if we're going to have the next and previous buttons, then I agree with Simo that I would like them to respect the filters. Ralph?
Yeah, thinking through and getting both of your points, I agree as well. But the only point I consider important then is if it's technically possible also to carry that over and that the next and previous button respect that query string, is that it's crystal clear in the interface that the next and previous button clicks are in the context of a filter selection and not global for all. Because maybe you don't notice that you had filters active and then start to search through and you're not aware that you are currently in a filter selection and not tapping through everything. So it should be communicated in some way, not sure where.
Right. So one way that's kind of clunky would be to have four links. Uh, next log message, previous log message, next log message, preserving filters, previous log message,
Mm.
preserving filters. Um,
But that would also would even more complicated because in regards of jumping, because if you click first on the next or previous within the filter and then click the global, then what should be the next step? Jump. That might be pretty confusing.
yeah, or how about a checkbox to say preserve filters? Or so now I'm thinking a little field set with two links and a checkbox. or 2 buttons and a checkbox. So then it would be a little subform rather than just links. And then maybe buttons would be appropriate.
Checkbox might work.
But anything in that direction is increasing the visual complexity, which is a downside.
Tricky.
So what if we just had 3 action links, previous log message, next log message, and clear filters? Would that be clear enough? Would we have to add some help text that the next and previous buttons respect the filters? And if you want to, if you don't want to respect the filters, you should first clear them.
Button, because that way it indirectly communicates that currently the filter is active. And that way might work. And it would be also easier because with the checkbox, you could always then recheck it, apply the filter again. Which would complicate things again.
If we were to do it with 2 submit buttons and a checkbox, that would be a little form, and you could check or uncheck the box. If we were to do it with 3 links, then, or action links, then the third one, the clear filters button, would simply reload the page, removing the query string.
Yep.
And the other 2 would, I guess all 3 would actually be links, and the work would be done when generating the page, not when you click on the link.
And when you're on, let's say, log entry number 35 and you press the clear filter button, and the filter is still active, and you're 35, and next would go to 40, and the previous would go to 25, just fictional. And if clear filter is pressed, then you go from 25, next goes to 26, and the previous goes to 24.
Right.
Yep.
So does that sound like a recommendation we can make? It'll be a fair amount of work to implement. Is it worth the effort?
I think yes.
Offer, Simo, Thomas, any opinions? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Shrug your shoulders?
I Um, I think it's worth the effort, but it feels like because it's such a sizable increase in the scope, not scope, but in the amount of work required, I struggle to see it as the same issue. It feels like an order of magnitude more complex than the original issue, where the original issue can be completed and put in for immediate gain, and then the more intensive approach could be followed up either by the same person who did this update or others. It feels like we've moved the goalpost in a big way if we do go through with the recommendation.
Yeah, that is the drawback that we are asking for a significant effort, which also means more code complexity. On the other hand, I would not want to have it as a follow-up issue because if we get the current version in with two simple links and then we change the behavior of links in a follow-up issue, I think that has potential for confusion.
That's a solid point. I guess what's worrying is the logos side of my mind versus the pathos side of my mind, because I if I were working this ticket at work, and somebody changed the scope in this way, I'd be mighty unhappy. Because you would have basically been at the finish line, and then someone saying, "Oh, no, we want it to be pretty different," and that was like none of that was what was originally captured in the initial solution proposal.
Ralph, go ahead.
Um, Sort of agree with Thomas, but still, maybe the initial solution proposal was simply not minding the fact of someone filtering. And the case we ran into with Simo's example then. And I imagine also if you have a long log message database with hundreds and thousands of messages, and you narrow it down to a certain type and a certain severity, I imagine not having that filter functionality in place and the functionality be mindful about it. I imagine that the previous and next become cumbersome, to put it gently. So yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
So with core Drupal, or the what I think of as vanilla Drupal, the question I would ask myself is what is the expected use case that we're looking at? Like the type of site you just described, I wouldn't use this UI, period. You're actually going to use something else to go through log messages that's going to be much more powerful. And at minimum, uh, for I don't know how many years, when I like the first 10 years easily, when I worked with Drupal, I just switched to doing everything from the command line. Like going through these types of log messages, um, if you're dealing with even thousands of log messages, even with filtering on, um, it like that UI is very rapidly going to be overwhelming. And so then the question becomes, at what point do we direct people away from this interface and towards more robust solutions?
I think for me, the use case would be to filter error messages and then go through them one by one. The current way to do is to filter the error messages and open each error message into a separate window or separate tab. So this would be alternative way to go through one form of messages, usually error messages, one by one, and ignoring all the info messages in between, especially cron.
Just one addition about Thomas's point. The issue creator was Longwave, and I suppose he would also have other tools, but yeah, by him was the request basically. So I suppose he might also have more complex sites he's dealing with.
If we
But
want to
he may
use,
be trying to help. Sorry.
yeah, if we want to reduce the scope or keep it simpler, I think it should default to keeping the filters on and leave the other user interface elements away. But I think it should default to having the filter on. But I don't know if it's useful then to have another kind of another extending the capabilities in another ticket.
And with if the filter should be on, then and the clear filter functionality should be a follow-up, then still it should be communicated at still my point that the scope is the filtered error messages and or log messages and not everything. That should be clear from the user interface.
Well, the clear button is the easy part to implement. I don't think it makes sense to push that to a follow-up issue. The hard part is the previous and next buttons respecting the filters.
Oh, okay.
Right? The clear button just reloads the current page without the query strings.
So it would be in any way a complex task in either way,
Yes.
with or without the clear button. Okay.
So do people want more time to think about this? Should we return to it next week, or do we want to wrap it up now?
I would wrap it up. I don't know what value would be added by putting it off. It sounds like people are fairly aligned with their position. I would view myself as an outlier, and I don't know that I can make strong enough arguments that I'd want to sway everyone anyway. So I think probably put together a recommendation and vote on it would seem reasonable.
Okay, um, so I guess there are two recommendations. One is the styling that, according to the style guide for Claro, these should be action links rather than buttons. Can we vote on that one? I I get a thumbs up from Ralph and Thomas. I agree. Offer, Simo, do you have an opinion in the opposite direction, or are you abstaining? Do you choose not to vote?
I agree. Just didn't find that
Okay.
option quickly enough.
Offer, are you still with us?
He wrote in the chat, not
Oh,
voting.
Not voting. Okay.
Um, Just one quick additional question in the context of point one. Should we add the idea not as a recommendation for that issue, for future follow-up to keep in mind to consider moving those buttons at a later point to the top bar?
Yeah, we can mention that, but I, I sort of like to make a bulleted or numbered list of recommendations, and
Yeah.
I would put that outside of the list
Oh, okay.
just
Well, that way. Okay.
because it's not actionable at this point. Okay, and then the bigger point. So the proposal is that we ask that the next and previous links, and for accessibility and more visual prominence, that we expand them to next log message and previous log message. So let's make that a separate point. Should we also recommend expanding the text to be next log message, previous log message? Thumbs up. Thumbs up from Thomas and Simo. I agree. Go ahead, Offer.
Trying to look for the thumbs up.
Oh, okay. All right. So the styling, both points of styling, we agree on.
The
Go
only
ahead.
thing in regards of the label, next log message is just a bit long. Is there a shorter potential? Next entry or previous entry? Just three words in one button label is just a bit much.
Well, these aren't buttons. These are action links, right?
True. Yeah, true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Forget what I said. Yeah. Next.
Okay.
Previous log
Okay.
message.
And then the hard question is, do we ask for substantial extra work to respect the filters? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Further comments? Thumbs up from Ralph and Simo. I agree. For Thomas, are you abstaining? Do you disagree?
Abstaining.
Okay. And a thumbs up from Offer. Okay, I think that's pretty settled.
And the column width.
Um, I see that as a separate issue. Simo also felt that way. Other opinions? I I think of that as a follow-up issue. Like if you were to open up half a dozen log messages in separate tabs and then page down through the tabs in your browser, you would get the same effect. So I don't. So I think the problem is already there. It's maybe a little more noticeable with this feature.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, then shall I write column width as a follow-up or leave it up if someone thinks it's easy to fix, then it could be done within the scope as well, but strictly speaking, it should be a follow-up issue.
I think Simo made a point earlier that one is strictly in the theme and the other is independent of the theme. So I really think it's just as a matter of issue scope, it's not a good idea to combine them.
Okay.
I think it should really be a follow-up.
Okay.
Okay, I think as often happens, we look at something which starts out being pretty simple, but with some thought, the, there's more to it than first strikes the eye. So I think that it'll actually be a much more useful feature with the extra work. So there are a few minutes left for the hour. I don't think we have enough time to look at another issue. Any last comments, or shall we just quit a few minutes early?
We can stop a bit early.
What's that?
I think we can quit a bit early.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to mid camp next week. I'll be away from home Tuesday through Thursday. I should be back on Friday and be in the meeting as usual, but I won't have as much time as usual outside of the meeting. Ralph, can you post the comment?
Yeah, I've already said I can do that. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Okay, that's all then. See you next week, I hope.
You enjoy mid-camp and greetings to the Chicago people.
Sorry, I'm
Okay.
gonna miss you because I can't go. But
Oh, are you in the Chicago area?
yeah, I live right next to Wrigley Field, so I'm traveling next Friday, and so I have to get ready for that. But feel free to reach out if you're in Chicago and you have time. I live right next to Wrigley Field.
Okay, great. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.